All right, I think we are on air. 1 second, just making sure. I think we're recording. So great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of day, everyone. Welcome to the um, largest and fastest growing um, large scale Scrum meetup of New York City. And just with a quick, just want to validate. You can't see my screen, correct? Just give me a thumbs up if yes. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. So, folks, today's session is meant to be more of an experience sharing, some tips, tips, tricks, and ideas on how to run less events, large-scale Scrum events. Now, we're making a big assumption here. Of course, we are not going to spend as much time discussing the what's and the whys with regards to less events. It's assumed that you understand them either by attending various, whether it was a training or a webinar or just self-study. This is more about the practical house, given the fact that we have to do quite a few things these days remotely, virtually, without having face-to-face interaction, which is quite unfortunate and certainly not ideal for large-scale Scrum or for Scrum. So, but we will try to get the best out of it. Out of this. So the ideas, the tricks, the tips and tricks, and some of the slides that I'll be sharing will describe some of those mechanics that you can experiment with. None of this is prescriptive. None of this is the best way to do. This is not a playbook. This is not a prescriptive manual. This is a little fine print there, right there on the slide. So hopefully this will be something that you can leverage in your own settings, assuming that you will be doing this in large scale Scrum as a part of less Scrum, large scale, less adoption. So a couple of things about the deck. You will, this is almost, it's a compilation of content that comes directly from LeSS.works, just for ease of reading. I leverage some of the content from the site and put it in the deck. So my slides sort of alternate. One slide is the what actually, so we don't need this. We don't need to discuss it, and the following slide is the how to do it virtually. I will be toggling between this deck and the Miro board. Whether you use a Miro board or a Mural or some other virtual facilitation collaboration canvas, it's up to you. I'm not sure. There's another one called Noriva Span, which allows you to do both virtual as well as physical interaction with the wall. So that's up to you, up to your company, I should say. So a couple of things. These lampoons, these figures, enlarged figures of what you will see. They will be slightly smaller as I go through the slides. And just let me give you a quick rundown what these are. The product owner, developers. This is the color coding I use. Stakeholders and users. This would be how I represent them. The manager, and also there's a bit of a annotation below, like optional role unless if exists, is focused on enabling and capability building. This is not a traditional manager. You notice that Scrum Masters are multicolored, and that's for a reason, because in large scale Scrum, one Scrum Master could potentially support up to 3 teams. So assuming this is team purple and team green, then there could be a Scrum Master who supports team purple and team yellow or team green. Here I'm kind of ad hoc composing these colors. And last but not least, there is a role of a LeSS coach, although it's not explicitly described in LeSS. If you go through initial stages of LeSS adoption, you might as well have someone by your side who has experience with LeSS and LeSS adoption and LeSS organizational design and LeSS pre-sprinting phase, which is not unimportant. It's pretty critical. So initial backlog refinement. This is actually the only one I'm going to give you just a bit of content, because it doesn't have a standalone graphic in LeSS.works repository of graphics. Otherwise, you would be able to see it on on the graphics on Les.work site. Something that this is the event that happens only once in a lifetime. It's a pretty comprehensive, pretty important event. It takes no less than 2 days. The main goal is to essentially come up with the initial product backlog and initial definition of done. Okay. And I'm not going to be reading line by line because you can do it yourselves when I share the deck. So let me give you more content. So this is, imagine this is your, I'm coming to this from the angle of a Zoom session. So imagine this blue box is your overall Zoom session, and these are your individual Zoom rooms. These are not team rooms, although you can in Zoom they will be called team 1, team 2. These are Zoom rooms for specific activities. It is recommended, of course, that when you go to into sessions like this one, you will have someone by your side who is very savvy with Zoom. So if you're not using Zoom, if you're using Microsoft Teams, or if you're using Google Meets, someone who is really savvy, so they can don't make the tool become your impediment, essentially, right? You would kick off with a bunch of activities to level set on what you're about to do. This is really the meat and potatoes of your backlog creation. So you want to have some senior managers in the room, maybe just for support, but more importantly, you want to have a product owner and real users and customers to set the tone. You will be using quite a bit of convergent and divergent. So people will be going off into different rooms, having discussions, and then that's divergent and convergent back into the main room where you have shared discussions. You will have an X number of Scrum Masters on hand, and they can alternate and go from different Zoom rooms depending on what kind of support is required. So really, this isn't something that goes fast. This is a pretty longish event. It will take you almost, at least it will be 2 days. It could be sometimes go for longer, depending how big your product is and how complex your conversations are. Try avoiding Zoom fatigue. So even I feel it often lately. So I'm sure you do too. So try to take frequent breaks. Use various energizers and various entertaining videos to keep people going. Because think of it this way: if you are on Zoom for 1 day straight, you will get tired. You will lose focus. The main goal of this big event, this is one-time event, is to come up with the initial definition of your product backlog and initial definition of what your done is, your definition of done, which will probably and hopefully mature over time as time goes by. You may want to use the Miro board for initial display and facilitation of everything that is relevant to the discussion. Try avoiding and that's why I put it in bold. Try avoiding heavy tools for as long as possible. Try to do as much as possible in a lean format. I'll show you my Zoom board just in a minute. My Miro board in just in a minute. This is just to give you some ideas how you can configure it. But really don't spend too much time committing these discussions and agreements into the tool, just because that will probably consume the biggest part of your day, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. So that's really initial backlog refinement. Let me pause because it's a large meeting. Just unmute yourself for a few seconds, ask a question, and I'll try to take at least a question or two for each slide, and then I'll move on.
Question for you, Gene. Will you be sharing the download of the Miro board with us, or will we create our own?
Karen, I'm not sure if I know how to export it so that it doesn't take. I'm using I'm using a part of my Miro board that has a bunch of other proprietary content. What I can do, I'll probably take a few snippets, or you feel free to take snippets of the board as I show it. It's super easy to learn, and it's super easy to use. So
Yeah.
trying to like take verbatim what I have there. Yeah, sure, absolutely. I just don't know how to electronically export it without bringing along a bunch of irrelevant content.
Oh, we could talk offline. I could show you how.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Okay. Cool. All right.
Question, maybe second one before. Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So I'm currently thinking about running a training, and we are discussing an option actually not to have things in whole days format, but like running 3 hours or 4 hours a day. What do you think about that? Like, is that a good way to go?
You mean for the initial backlog?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, for an example, what do you say about this one as well?
Sure. Let me explain why it's 2 days for for pre-COVID, right? Because we bring a bunch of people together in in an open space, and therefore it is a pretty I don't want to say expensive, but it's an invasive procedure, right? So if you fly people all over the place, users, stakeholders, and developers, and then it just makes sense to do 2 days in a row. Because of we're all remote and all separated by time zones, you can try to run this experiment, but then it will just take you much longer. I would say cumulatively try not to spend less than the recommended 2 days. Otherwise, it hints to the fact that it's going to be relatively superficial. So if you want to spread it across the whole week, maybe have 4, 4, 4, and 4 hours, and that would be your initial refinement session, you can experiment with that. But at the same time, if you do it for 2 days in a row on Zoom or on Meet and Google Meets, it doesn't really mean that you are doing this for 8 hours, right? That's why I mentioned in the notes. Take frequent breaks, 60, 90-minute sessions, and have a bunch of energizers and bio breaks in between. Improvise, with virtual reality, and this is actually not virtual reality, with remote work, a lot of what we would recommend and have done in real life is an experiment. So that would be my suggestion, but you can try it. Okay. Thank you. Let me go through a few more slides, and I'll come back, of course, to the Q&A later. So the backlog refinement, again, not to read verbatim this slide, because it's, unless that works, just for your ease, you can go slide by slide and I'll alternate. This one happens every week. Every sprint. And let me show you my illustration on Zoom, what this may look like. I'll show the Miro board after I go through these. So a backlog refinement, obviously it's every sprint because you're prepping yourself for the next sprint. The overall, as we call the overall backlog refinement, is where team representatives, team members, usually one person, at most 2 if it's a small, less product group structure, and you have maybe a strong urge to bring 2 people, usually 1 person per team. They come together, and consider this as a Zoom main session. And while they're meeting for about an hour, everyone else could either get ready or get their stuff together, right? So they may be they give them the hour back, because 60 man hours, right? If you have 50, 60 man operation, 60 man hours, it's a lot. Don't keep people. That's why we don't want to keep people where they don't need to be. In this session, as I'm sure you know from just understanding the overall PBR, we decide what are we going to refine. We're not really refining yet. And this is where we refine it, the main Zoom session. And we suggest to have probably very few, not more than maybe 3, at most 4 breakout rooms, Zoom rooms, where you have a mixed group of individuals. Notice this is not by team. Different lampoons, different colors, with users and stakeholders. Refining items, clarifying them further, Notice a PO isn't necessary there. You don't need a PO there because you already do nitty-gritty stuff. So you can do it according to, that's how we do it, unless we do it with users and stakeholders. We suggest frequently rotating people. Frequently, but not too often, so that you don't turn into this, very shallow flyby. I came in and checked out and checked in, checked out. Have people spend there enough time so they can understand the gist of it. I put this number 3 item here, assign, and maybe I should put in bold. Well, I don't put in bold. Assign a backlog item and certain SMEs to a Zoom room. So something keeps stationary and something else rotates. So keep those items perhaps, and specific SMEs and users that have most of the information about those items. Keep them stationary within the Zoom room and have developers rotate. Okay, and you do it like iterate. It's like you're swinging and you're swinging and you're swinging, and every time they swing by, they look for what others did, and as well as they contribute on their own, and solicit them to participate in estimation. So one of the big discussions questions I lately get: do we have a good reason to believe that estimations in less done by many people are more accurate than in some other ways of working? And of course, we don't spend much time in LeSS discussing estimation, and because this is implied, assumed, and we don't want to weaponize estimation and metrics. But if you think about it, just because everyone touches a backlog item, just because everyone goes through the motion of estimating and refining with others, it would be natural to believe that probably accuracy would be slightly higher. Okay. I'm going to pause for a second. Any questions?
Yes, I have one question. In this, like, team will be in different Zoom room. So who identify dependency and how they manage dependencies?
Okay, so Sunil, I'll be frank with you. This is the tactical implementation of what you raised. It's really not a Zoom related or virtual enablement related question. It's more of a conceptual question about LeSS. Internally within LeSS product group, there is no such thing as an internal dependency. There are opportunities to work together because of high degree of transparency. And because of the Miro board, you can actually see, you can scroll left and right, up and down, and see who does what. The need so we really don't refer to this as a dependency. We refer to this as an opportunity to work together. In fact, we promote the idea of coupling developers from different teams on efforts that could be complementary. So you may call it the dependency, but we really steer away from the term because it's not a dependency per se, where I put a hard stop on something because you are not finishing your work. If I see so, I will jump and I'll help you out. So these rooms are not per team, as you notice. These rooms are a mixed group of developers. So we have, how many people we have in the queue? I'm not even sure now, 63 people, right? We can split up into, that's probably too many. It's almost like a LeSS product group. We would split into 4 rooms, each room having maybe 15 developers from different teams. And we would have conversations around things that, pertain. So we, at this point, at this juncture, again, this is not LeSS per se conversation. This is LeSS remote conversation. So it assumes we already understand that what these guys do, what these team members do, isn't any team specific. We're still refining. We don't know whether it's a red team that's going to get it or a blue team is going to get it when they plan the sprint. Okay. Okay. Was another question?
Real small question.
Yep.
What was your recommendation for the rotation that you mentioned?
Not
too much, but
I'm going to use the open. So because of this, we use what's called open space technology. Meaning, we use the law of 2 feet. You spend there enough time to get enough information, and you move on. I think I mentioned throughout the document, use a very simple function in Zoom. It's called broadcast, or I'm sure you will be using some other IM facility. In fact, I recommend alongside with Zoom and Miro, I have another IM facility that it syncs up with Teams, right? So if a bunch of teams or a bunch of rooms, they have a bunch of maybe Slack channels or Skype groups, and announce frequently what's going on, so you can pull people on demand. So rotate as frequently as you need. So this is the last bullet here, right here. Be frequent enough, but don't do it, peppering. Don't pepper people. Like I come in, I check out, and go.
Okay.
Make them spend enough time to understand. Hey, we're discussing item number XYZ 25. Who is going to join and discuss it with us?
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Joe.
Hey, Gene, I got a question.
Yeah, David.
So when folks are rotating, how do you maintain the estimate? Like whoever's facilitating that room, maybe the first few minutes or 10 minutes, you get some estimates, and then they rotate out and some more people come in, and what's that like?
Yeah, well, I would suggest at the time when the estimate, when they use planning poker, just fall back on good old planning poker techniques. Any estimation round, just fall back on what you would do otherwise, and don't add just 5 + 3 + 8 + 7 and do the mean value. No, do the usual. When I say do the usual, I mean to say we're not going to review planning poker tips and tricks now, but I'm sure you're familiar with those, right? Since I know you. So and every time we go through the round, do the same. And then you just look at these numbers. Hey, this round of estimation, but these people, gave us this number. Initially, in the end, does it really matter whether we have like a bunch of 8s and a bunch of 13s? We're talking about 50, 60 people oscillating between the 8 and the 5, or 5 to 8. It assumes that we're somewhere within the range of understanding. So since we're not chasing the number, we're not chasing the metric, it should be sufficient.
Hey, Gene.
Oh, I know, Julian. You caught me. Go.
I'm sorry.
Go.
No, really quickly. This is good information so far. So the question I have is, so as you have people in breakouts, right? How do you create this space for individuals to express their shared understanding of the product vision in the main session? Do you create a path back for people to talk and communicate what they learn in the different breakout rooms?
Let me think for a second. Should I? So we are at the backlog refinement discussion, and therefore at this time we are not necessarily So obviously everyone has a product vision, because that was taken care of during the initial PBR that happened once. So if for some dramatic reasons we need to revisit product definition, then of course this is something we need to do. We are not at spring planning meeting yet, where you may potentially have a product owner restate a sprint goal, which is not explicitly recommended in LeSS, but on demand it could be done. I think personally, as a coach, I think it's a good practice for PO to continuously remind his product group, his teams, what his or her intentions for the upcoming sprint. But since this is just a refinement session, we're not necessarily discussing explicitly strategic product goals or more tactical sprint goals, because we don't even know if some of these items will end up in a sprint. We would like to believe that, because they are at the very top of the backlog. So we're just prepping ourselves. Okay, hopefully that answers your question, but clearly stating the goal for your product upfront is a super important thing, and I do recommend considering sprint goal discussion also, although it's not explicitly a part of LeSS rules. Sprint planning. So again, not too much on this slide. In fact, we'll spend no time because it's right off. It's lifted and shifted from LeSS.works with an explicit reference and attribution where it comes from. I'll spend a little more time on sprint planning, what we may do potentially in Zoom, right? So during sprint planning, somewhere similar dynamic observed at the beginning. So initial, the first session, I'll call it sprint planning 1. Again, it's relatively short, maybe one hour long at most. We have a representation from each team. If it's a fully fledged LeSS product group, many people don't bring more than one person, because again, this is not a detailed breakdown of work that we will be doing there. It's just to identify which team is going to pick up what. Please note, this representation is not by Scrum Masters. This representation is by real developers, because this is not, Scrum Masters are not expected to commit on behalf, or not even make this decision on behalf of their developers. Scrum Masters have a completely different focus in LeSS. Although in Scrum, they shouldn't be held for that either. And based on what these reps have decided, each team is going to inherit a handful of items, backlog items, that they will need to break down further into, I guess, smaller tasks or subtasks or pretty tasks or mini tasks, whatever you want to call them. I'm trying to be tool agnostic, so I don't want to, anchor to any specific tooling language. So think of this as a main Zoom session, and many teams, up to 8 teams in their respective Zoom room. And because of the Miro configurations and because of very close proximity to where each team does their breakdown, it should be visible to other teams, every team, to what other teams do. And this is an opportunity for collaboration. Like, for instance, you can even, in each team, you can say, hey, Joe, or hey, Jim, or Gene, or Craig, you are going to be a scout, designated scout. Scout around, eyeball what other teams are creating, and just, move the Miro board left and right, scroll it. And if you see that identifying something that is important to us, give us heads up, and maybe we'll send one of ours over there to observe what they do, or maybe we will do, again, convergent, divergent. So again, that's why having maybe a few extra Zoom, I don't call them Zoom admins, Zoom savvy extra folks would be useful. This way you can focus developers on having discussions and refinement and breakdown work. Whereas, Zoom aid, Zoom is ZME, Zoom, I'm not sure what that is. Zoom Master Executive. They will be helping with these simple mechanics. The goal is for every team to produce their own sprint backlog, not to be confused with the private team backlog, which we strongly, I shouldn't even say discourage. There's no such thing as a private team backlog in LeSS, because all teams work together. But every team will have an instance of a backlog for the next, I guess, 2 weeks, depending how long the sprint is. Things to avoid, again, having teams working in silos. That's why we don't like a blue team or a maroon team doing everything on their own, away from all other teams, not paying attention to the other teams, gradually building up sprint backlogs. Because as each team refines further and breaks up backlog items into small chunks of executables, and they should be transparent to other teams. So the ultimate goal is for each team to walk away with a sprint backlog for that team. And if we identify that there was some coupling that needs to be done, and developers would have to talk to developers throughout. So just keep that in mind, and try not to minimize the importance of direct, transparent collaboration. Any questions on that? I'll take two if you don't mind, and I'll take more later.
I think you might have misspoken, or maybe I misheard, but you were talking about the team backlogs versus the overall product backlog, and you were trying to make a point about how teams don't have. You said they don't have a private backlog, and I get that, but before you mentioned that, you were saying something about the progression from the larger product backlog to the team focused sprint backlog.
Yeah, so maybe I misspoke, and this is my Zoom fatigue kicks in, right? So, we don't support a notion team private backlog, whether it's while refining or planning or throughout a sprint, because that leads to local optimization by teams and may lead to component centric development. A sprint backlog is a temporary instance of what a team would do throughout a sprint to support those backlog items that they have selected for that sprint. So I consider this almost like it's a butterfly that lives for 2 weeks, right? It will be null at the end of the sprint. So the reason why I stressed that, maybe I misspoke, I stressed the notion that it's not a team's private backlog that lives on. It's the sprint backlog that will disappear on the last day of the sprint.
Got it.
Joe, hopefully that clarified, and
just what I needed.
Calling this out. If I misspoke, I might have caused confusion to others. Okay, let me give you another page here. Sprint review. So this is somewhere. So again, this is a lift and shift from the LeSS.work site. Sprint review, sprint retro, and sprint and overall. So specifically on sprint review, it's probably one of the simpler ones. One main session, big Zoom session. Create Zoom rooms on demand. Well, I'm sorry, I misspoke again. Each Zoom room would represent a single team. But what happens here is, why is it simple? Because it's constant converge, diverge, converge, diverge. So you may first start with convergence and have everyone in the same main Zoom room with users, stakeholders, of course, a product owner, and everyone, their mother there, restating the purpose of the sprint that just finished. Have a chat, have a talk about what has been delivered together by the whole LeSS product group. And I'm not suggesting to spend too much time rehearsing for this, because if you spend too much rehearsing, that means we're in a town hall mode mindset, and that's not what we want to do. This is a very working event. So after that, each team will most likely go to their respective rooms, and think of it now as of course, it's an open space, right? Virtual open space. Think of it as a Javits Center, West Side Highway, New York City, where you have a annual car show, or a computer fair. You can go from station to station to station and see what's happening there. So anyone can rotate and go to different teams, go to different rooms, and see what has been delivered there individually. Teams will be illustrating this. You may want to clock this. You want to time this, like create a very, very simple schedule, so people know. Think of it almost like a conference, right? You know to which room to go at what time to hear what speaker's speaking, right? And you may have multiple rooms with activities concurrently. Here we just have one. We don't have multiple threads. We just have one thread. In other words, you may clock in, clock out, and people can actually, users and stakeholders can also rotate. I've been to the blue team, I've been to the green team, I've been to the gray team. Okay, now we need to converge. So essentially, this is it. This is a way to reflect back, review with everyone what has been delivered in the sprint. You can use Miro and embed your web browsers in there, or you don't need to be that fancy if obviously you're delivering something that is shippable or something that's workable. So you can just toggle and go to your respective browsers and just, I don't need to spend much time explaining those mechanics. I mean, although you can embed stuff within, you can embed things within Miro, and just for the sake of simplicity. We'll take another question maybe here, just in the interim, if there is any.
I see Vladimir has raised hand.
Vlad has his hand up.
Vladimir or Joe?
I already typed my question.
Okay, I don't read, so let me start.
Okay, I can say that. I said, sorry for dragging you back to refinement logistics, how people can self-organize the conversations and Zoom rooms for refinement, and will it be too rigid to say there are only team Zoom rooms, or if people would need to discuss something, how does it work logistically?
Let me just read that. I have to go again, sorry. Well, I mean, during Backlog Refinement, this is a mixed group of developers. So, yeah, I mean, every time there is a question of how do people self-organize that comes up, I wonder, like it's the 63 of us right now in the queue, what kind of self-organizing? We don't need a manager. We can kind of break out. I mean,
so let me clarify my question. Let's say I want to talk to David Nilsson and Mike Andreen, and we just say, well, how do you do this? Well, this Zoom is facilitated by Gene, so we probably will open our own Zoom and go and talk there and leave this for good. And then who knows where we are, and people will be running around thinking like, where is Vlad and Dave and Mike?
So I guess if you and David are in different rooms and you think you need David in your room at the moment, you can ping him and he will join. I mean, unless your scenario is a little more complex, Vladimir. If you feel that, so whether you are a part of, whether you're in the room where there's only your team and you need David, or you are in the room with a mixed group of developers and you need David, because David is logged in, whether it's probably Zoom and Slack and whatever, you can just ping David, right? Or am I missing? Is there more complexity to that?
Yeah, let me give a couple of tips. I mean, if you have like a Teams chat going, that's overall for everything, you can ping people and bring them to a specific room. Also, when you do the overall PBR, you can kind of start to figure out which discussions are going to be happening where, and making sure people are aware of that. And then, your daily Scrum with your teams ahead of time, just talking about what if you really want one member in each breakout session, you can the team can self-organize in their daily Scrum the day before. Those are just some tips that I've found useful.
Yeah,
David, this is kind of like how to maintain transparency where people are. If people start to self-organize and start to go off, there could be a question, how many actually rooms do we have and what do we discuss and where? That's kind of question.
I think if I could add something here.
David, go ahead.
I would have, as a facilitator, I would create a bunch of extra rooms. And then I would set up Zoom so people can move in and out of rooms. And I would instruct people, if you need to have a side conversation, ping me. I'll see if there's a room available. And if there is, you can either move in there or I'll move you in there. That's what I would do.
And I agree with that. So a lot of this could be so unpredictable. Like the beauty of, I guess, so not so much beauty when we're all remote, but the beauty of this is that you can just on demand, on the fly, decide we need an extra room, or you want to have a few rooms that are vacant that are lined up. You can do that as well. One good thing to have is to have a few facilitators and people that are savvy with Zoom mechanics that will be just listening in to these conversations and offering simple solutions to very simple problems, right? We're not discussing a complex problem. We're discussing a very simple problem, how to improve, how to make more efficient the collaboration between two people that are at the moment not in the same room. Well, the mechanics of this could be discussed and innovated on the fly. Okay, as long as we understand not the mechanics, the logic why we're doing certain things behind the scene. As long as we have that understanding, figuring out mechanics should be relatively straightforward thing. Okay, let me finish off with a few extra slides, and maybe we'll, in fact, I suspect here on this call, there could be people that have experimented and excelled with Miro and Zoom. So I'm expecting, you guys to share tips. In fact, maybe I will use the script of the chat, and then I'll make it available to you. So if you have any ideas, ping them in there. Okay. So that was the sprint review. And the retrospective, well, that's really straightforward. It's very simple because there are two types of a retrospective. Well, the first one, the team retrospective, is super simple because it is nothing but your, your one team Scrum doing their own private, all hands on deck, dirty laundry type of thing, closed doors retro. So you may kick off with in the same Zoom meeting, and then each team will go to their private Zoom room and do the needed. So the way you're gonna use Miro for that is probably slightly different. In fact, depending to what extent you have been using, or you shall be using Miro for your daily activities, you may have separate private boards for each team. Like for a retro, since you want to keep it private to yourself, you may either use a private board or on the same Miro board by gentleman's agreement, say, hey, don't go and then look at our stuff, and scroll all the way to the left and scroll all the way to the right and cover it. Again, we're not trying to over-engineer this, right? As long as people understand what's happening, what's supposed to be happening in those Zoom rooms, in those private retrospectives, individual teams retrospectives, they shouldn't be embarking on someone else's privacy. Okay, and then I finally get to illustrate my most favorite lampoons, the two colored ones. In the overall retrospective, and by the way, the duration of each, you see there, 1 day, 1 hour per sprint per team. Then finally, last but not least, overall retrospective. Now, who goes there? Of course, we're not discussing the who and the why, and more of the how, right? So those Scrum Masters that represent teams in less product group will be in attendance. Perhaps a few developers, if things that we're about to discuss are very technology related. A product owner, for sure. She needs to hear this stuff because that's organizational stuff, right? Very systemic stuff. And the managers. If there are any managers that still exist, it's their place to be. And what I put in bold, so a couple of things I put in bold. And these are the things I would actually recommend not hiding. These are not team individual retrospectives. These are items that should be very transparent, very vivid, very public. Organizational impediments, displayed as a backlog or just a list, maybe a prioritized list of, essentially it's the backlog, right? If it's got priorities to it. And make sure that your managers and perhaps a product owner too walk away with to-do items. This is the great time for them to walk away, to show their ability to enable, to support, and to build capabilities. They're not there to assign responsibilities. They're there to take responsibilities. And I would recommend having maybe like a to-do item that has WIP, work in progress, visualized, perhaps somewhere in a very visible place. Put it on the Miro board. If you use Confluence extensively, put it up there as well. So this is how you will leverage this discussion. Now, what you do in those events, and by the way, Miro is, and again, God knows I'm not promoting Miro as a tool. I have no affiliation with it whatsoever. You can use Mural or you can use any other tool. Miro has got actually a few built-in templates and games and various tips, whatever you want to call them, mechanics that will enable you to have a good conversation, good facilitation. I'll show you in a few minutes what those are. I recommend strongly, and you put it in bold, for this level, for this kind of conversation, to have a system modeling session with senior managers and the PO, so that they understand not only what those systemic root causes are, systemic problems, but also understand the root causes. So that's why we want to do system modeling, so they understand the cause and effect relationship. And so that's that. I'll take a question before. Maybe there are no questions. Last but not least, very easy, very simple, and not explicitly discussed on LeSS.works. But this is just a daily Scrum. We don't have a graphic for it, so simple it is, right? Each team does their own little thing. You may send out what's called a scout. So from time to time, you can have the need to sneak up on the other teams. What are they discussing for today? So send one of your own to theirs. So there's 8 Zoom rooms. One person from each team can go and sneak up on the other teams, what they do. And of course, on Miro board, you can visualize each team's conversation. If they can spend only a few minutes prior to each daily Scrum to pre-populate the board. And those scouts could be on the lookout for things. Now, Scrum of Scrums has been a mystery for many, and some companies have taken it to a very far extreme, and they consider this as almost like a sacred event that has to be held every day, 5 times a day for coordination. Really not true. In large scale Scrum, we do it only on demand if needed. Recommended no more than 3 times a week. And and by the way, this is clearly not for Scrum Masters to represent teams. This is for developers to talk to developers. So this could be as simple as a separate Zoom room, or when these events are over, the reps will stay in the same main session and have a chat. I don't want to over-engineer this because there's really not much to say. So everything that has transpired in those individual Zoom rooms that may potentially need a follow-up, team reps would be discussing this separately right after Zoom, or right after the daily Scrum. Right, and so while you're thinking of any questions, let me share with you what may potentially look like your Zoom facility, right? Not the best design for sure, and there's no best way to start. Let me start, since I was on daily Scrum, I'll share. I suggest using frame sets a lot. They are pretty they're useful. You can copy paste and you can bring the entire content and just delete it on demand. So for instance, every team can come to the same frame set and have their own board and have their own discussion. And you can, of course, enlarge these things and see who's doing what. And because I can do this and everyone else can do this, not just me, you can have each team designate their own scout. Hey, take a look at what this blue team does. And if they move this item to the to-do column, let us know. So no prescriptive way to handle this. Just look at what everyone else does. You know, burn down charts just to the extent that you care to mark this. It's very specific to whatever that team wants to do. Don't make this into a metric saga, or don't turn it into a weapon, please. So it's that's daily Scrum, and of course, coming out of this, you can have you know, Scrum of Scrums. Almost you can do it in the same frame and have a discussion. And by the way, you can repurpose this every morning. So this is very light. You can delete it, or you can delete the cards, or you can delete the whole board. In no particular order. Sprint review. This is probably the lightest of all, because what really matters here is not what's on the Miro board, but what's working, right? So if you don't have anything to deliver, it doesn't matter what you put on the Miro board. You may have some aha moments collected from your users and stakeholders if you would like. So you have these built-in features in Miro, so you can use those. But really, this is like an empty field, right? So what should be happening here is the actual review. And you can, so I would really not recommend embedding multiple browsers in this frame set, because it will just make it very kludgy, and who knows how Miro will react. Just use different sessions, different browsers, and point people where they need to go to view what is being displayed, illustrated by each team. For retrospective, you have the whole gamut of things you can do. These are all from the Mural library. Team retrospectives, you know, bad, sad, glad. And I don't need to really paraphrase this for you, because I'm sure you're familiar with these light coaching tools. These are various techniques each team can run. So let me zoom out. You can come up with, so I'm kind of putting this together so it's easy for me to navigate now, but these specific sections would be probably private and away from everyone else. So if you want, you can either cover it with a like a JPEG that says "Do not touch Team 5," and only Team 5 will look at it. You can, you know, you can improvise, or you can create a separate Miro board just for your private stuff, like a team retrospective, which I think is a bit, you know, I think it's a bit of an overkill. What else here? And of course, there's something that's for overall retrospective. This is overall retrospective. So this kind of an impediment backlog, organizational impediment backlog, I would suggest keeping transparent and visible to everyone. Don't turn it into a private sector. I don't know what this is. Someone is playing with it. Suggest using any of the above mentioned available templates. But more importantly, I would like you to consider system modeling. And if you need any tips and tricks on how to use a system model to elicit conversation, to pave the road to a conversation, please let me know. I can share with you offline. So this is the one and only organizational touch point where your Scrum Masters, acting as system, organizational design improvement people, would be interfacing with managers. And note something else, it would be good to assign a manager to any organizational impediment that you have identified. If you want to talk about transparency, this is an example how to do it, right? Simple. So it's the concept of an inverted organization that we recommend in LeSS. In the traditional organization, managers, senior management sees what individuals are talking about and what they do, but not the other way around. And here we have, I guess, a slightly different concept, right? We have individual teams doing their own retrospectives, private team retrospectives, but managers, if they take responsibility of for any action, the rest of the organization should be able to see. And here are a few more. I know we're coming short on time. Product backlog refinement. So all of the above mentioned, right? So you have this huge backlog of prioritized items, and you can use some of the templates to help you decide. Like for instance, you can use in the hour that these guys spend together, the reps and the PO, you can use this canvas to decide which items are truly the highest priority. So that's a quick and dirty. It shouldn't take you more than an hour. And from there, you go to individual breakout sessions. So these are a mixed group of individuals, right? Lots of collaboration across. These backlog items are being refined and refined and refined, and you may produce smaller items off of those. And guess what? Let me zoom out again. You start with the backlog, you finish with the backlog. It's just better refined backlog. No one takes any items yet to themselves and says, this is mine. This will come later when they go to sprint review. I'm sorry, sprint planning. I misspoke again. And here's sprint planning again. I try to keep this very concise and very, I guess, cluttered, just because for the purposes of this session, in order not to scroll too far back, left and right, I'm keeping this close. But since Miro is indefinite, I really recommend spacing apart much bigger, much more. Here's an example also discussing. So you may have, and I think I mentioned this, although it's not explicitly mandated, unless it's not explicitly stated, I recommend discussing sprint goal. So you can start with that. And now your product backlog becomes, each one of these items gets picked by an individual team. And I'm showing here team 3 sprint backlog. You see now this sprint backlog, not product backlog. And why is it important to delineate between the two? Because the sprint backlog is nothing but a bunch of tasks that need to be complete for the sprint goal to be met. So this is a product backlog item number 5, decomposed into a bunch of technical tasks. Okay. And of course, in the end, this all can be mapped back to the overall backlog, overall product backlog. So these are, I guess, just a few tips how to improvise and how to compensate for the lack of in-person face-to-face collaboration. So the couple of upstream dependencies, as you would like to hear them, right? It's dependent on having less product group in place, properly structured teams, product definition, product owner identified one person. So in other words, it assumes that less is in place. And this is just how to improvise to enable yourself in remote settings. This whole conversation wasn't to justify or to explain the whys behind. And I really can't keep up. I couldn't keep up with so many of your pings. I think some of these references are great. I will review them myself. Any additional ideas you may have to improvise tactically on how to support?
Would you mind zooming out so that I could grab a screenshot?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is at 10%.
That's fine.
Let me.
It's just the mindset. That's all.
Yeah, sure. And I think, Karen, you were asking for an export. I mean, I wish I could. You see how much stuff I get there. I don't even know how to do it without polluting. Maybe there.
I put directions in the chat privately to you.
Okay. Okay, folks. Well, this is pretty much what it was. budgeted for 1 hour. I have received lots of feedback that although people like sometimes going over 1 hour, majority of people like to stay within an hour because it's a weekend.
Yeah.
I want to be respectful of that. I would like to wrap this. I am recording, I'm assuming, right? It doesn't say anywhere, but I think I am. I'll make it available along with the deck, and I will sanitize the script for the content that is probably relevant, right? And I'll make it available as well. Okay.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining. It was not it was just a working session. Thank you all for joining.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a million.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Bye.
Gene.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you very
weekend.
much.
Gene.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Thanks, awesome people. Have a good day.